Hey everyone, welcome to the water cooler. I am so thrilled to be here today to chat a very interesting question with Angel and Joyce. For those who haven't met Angel, she's new to the water cooler. She's a tech transformation thought leader and advisor, and she has a passion at the intersection in finance and tech. And Angel and I met because of a podcast. Good to see you, Angel.
Kelly, good to see you. And so glad to be here, part of the virtual water cooler, and can't wait to delve into the conversation.
This is going to be fun. And Joyce Schulman is back. And it is so good to see Joyce. For those who may not know Joyce, well, if they weren't watching Good Morning America when you're wandering around Central Park with Al Roker, Joyce is the co-founder and CEO of 99 Walks and Jetty Fitness. She's an entrepreneur, an idea junkie, and a walking enthusiast. So Joyce, good to see you.
Always great to see you, Kelly.
Okay, so our question today is a juicy one. What to do when senior clients are male? And this question's coming in from an executive woman, are male, and you need to build a deep relationship with them, which can feel odd. Yes, it can. How do you get around that? Whew. I got thoughts, but I want to know what you guys are thinking. Angel, you're new to the water cooler, so I'll put you right on the spot to jump in first.
The hot seat. Now, I love this question, Kelly, because when I was very early in my career, I had the same issue as how do I relate to my male colleagues? How do I relate to my male clients? And now I received some advice that I consider bad advice. Other people may not, but I had a very senior person come to me. She was a woman, and she said, "Oh, why don't you learn to play golf? And why don't you go smoke a couple cigars and do things that you're probably not interested in, just to build that relationship and build that rapport?" And I started to do that, and I was like, no, I'm not going to put myself in situations and force myself to partake into these hobbies just to build a relationship. So I think that there are other ways that you can build that relationship with the clients and with the male colleagues, such as, number one, finding a common ground, an area where you can relate and take it from there. That whole theory of forcing yourself to do things that men are interested in, I am so against. So that's the first thing that I would definitely suggest. And I want to leave it open for Joyce to give a suggestion as well, because I have an entire list.
Oh, I love this. We're going to work our way down this list. And I'm so glad you said that you came up with that story, because I do have a golf story that turned out differently. But yeah, this idea of, part of it, I was hearing someone giving some advice that was sort of felt like generic, disconnected, and, well, why would I do that? Anyway, Joyce, thoughts on all of this?
Well, I want to start at the very, very beginning, which is, I hate this question. I mean, Kelly always knows, she invites me because I'm always going to say the thing, right? But for heaven's sakes, we're actually having this conversation.
Yes.
Right? When I say I hate this question, what I hate is that we're in a position as women that we feel the need to have this conversation. Yeah. Why is this still a thing? So I'm having a little bit of a challenge getting past my initial, why are we still having this conversation? And yet there's no doubt that we are. So that's kind of the first hurdle for me personally to get past. And then the other issue I have with the question is that baked into this question are a whole lot of assumptions. Mm-hmm. And I'm a little troubled by that too. So the first thing I would say is we have to get to the place where we're treating people as individuals and not lumping them into, I have to treat this individually differently. I have to engage differently because he's male.
And because he's male, he likes to golf and smoke cigars.
Yeah, listen, but in all of those kinds of stereotypes is a whole lot of truth. And the reality is that a lot of men do engage, connect, communicate differently than we do.
Yes.
But nevertheless, I do think that we need to walk into those relationships a little bit more open to take them as an individual before we immediately jump into our assumptions, which may very well prove to be accurate, but let's give them the benefit of the doubt when we start.
Exactly. Such a good point. Because yes, there is an element of this question, like, really, we're in what year and we're having to have this, and on sort of all sides, we can't have a self-awareness that, that we need to connect with the best people to, right. I'm assuming, okay, senior clients. So this is the person who's the vendor selling into someone. If you are the person receiving the pitches, don't you want the best talent around you? Aren't you being open to meeting other people? All of that kind of stuff. Angel, thoughts on all this?
I absolutely agree with everything that Joyce said, because as I said, find the common. We're still people. If you're a man, if you're a woman, if you don't identify as a man or a woman, or however you choose to identify, finding that common ground opens the doors to have multiple conversations, and then from build that trust, and you build a rapport. And if it can be something as simple as, if you both have a family, or what are you doing for the weekend, or coffee or tea, or maybe you're a foodie. I'm a foodie, so I always relate to people in food, the best restaurants. But, early in my career, I had those issues of relating to male clients, male colleagues. And I think it was just the pressure and really how society plays. And we hear all of these different theories and concepts. But I think once you sort of dig into it, and now that times are a bit more modern, personally, I haven't seen the apprehensions that I've seen earlier in my career when I'm speaking to a male client or colleague. It's normal conversation. I don't feel the pressures to say, oh my gosh, how do I relate? Or what do I do? Or is this going to be very difficult to build this conversation? I think the majority of the people in my network are men, which is very strange. I'm all for empowering women, but when I look at it, I actually had this conversation with a friend. I said, gosh, many of the senior leaders in my network who actually give me advice and I'm connecting with, they're men. And so I think along the way, I've picked up that concept that Joyce mentioned of realizing that we're just people, and you just have the conversation and you build a relationship from there.
Yeah.
So Kelly and Angel, now that I started out by saying, why are we having this conversation and treat everybody as a human, I would pose, and Kelly, I don't know if this is cool with you.
Go for it.
The secondary conversation or question I have is, what happens when you launch into that relationship building? You treat them like a normal person, and then you find out that they're a misogynistic mansplainer, because I've been in those shoes too, right? So it's really Pollyanna of us and awesome to say, we're all just people. Let's just treat them, men in our network, the same way we treat all of the humans. But what happens when they prove us wrong?
Well, I mean, I was going to say, and Angel jump in, is like, this is part of the relationship building, right? Like the idea that you get to know someone rather than assuming that they love golf and cigars. Go back to the woman who gave you that advice, Angel. And then, I think going in is assuming that like someone is a decent human being. And, maybe it is only through those continuous interactions that you discover that they're misogynist mansplainer. And you're like, right. That wouldn't have been revealed if we'd just gone to play golf, or we'd just gone to a baseball game, or, sat with a glass of port and a cigar. It may not have been revealed, but because this happened and this person got comfortable, they could reveal their true selves. And when those moments happen, I'm always grateful. Anyway, Angel.
Right. I definitely agree. Like having those conversations and thorough conversations, of course, each person, you learn a little bit more about each person. And some people can be a bit misogynistic, or, you have the microaggressions that are thrown in there. I've been through several situations where I'm like, wait a minute, this is not going the way I planned. But I think it also leads into what Kelly was saying, the relationship building. So there's going to be some bumps along the way, and there's going to be people who don't think that a woman can do a certain job. And I've always worked in a male dominated environment. So I've had that struggle my entire career is me walking into a room. I work in tech now, and people looking at me, and she's a woman, and 95% of the room is men. And is she going to understand? Or I asked someone specifically for instructions for something, and they said, oh, it's too difficult.
Oh my God.
Too difficult for majority of my career. But I think, that opens the door to sit down, have the conversation. And we have to realize just because we have that EQ when we're walking in without understanding, that the other person may not. But it really is a bridge builder. And then if you walk into that situation and you're being professional, you're being assertive and approachable, I think it's only a winning ending there. Yeah.
So Joyce, what did you do in this scenario?
In which scenario?
Well, the one you gave us. What do you do? What's your thought? You asked us a tough question there. So
well, let me just real quick follow up on something that Angel said, because you said two things that I think bear repeating. The first is I think the phrase was assertive and appropriate. And I think that's a really good mantra, I think, for us to hold into our minds, because it's that perfect sort of, I don't even want to say balance, but those are the two things, right? You got to be both of those things. And then the second is this idea that relationships take time. And Kelly, you speak to this all the time. Networking is not in its best version is not transactional. It's actually relationship building. And no matter what you do, relationships are going to take some time. So there's kind of that piece of it. And then as far as what I've done in those circumstances, I had a situation last year where I was working as part of a team. We were mostly women. We were 3 men. It was a very long and intense 5 days, those 12, 14-hour exhausting days. And what I did was completely lost my temper. Not my finest moment, but it is, I actually called a friend of mine and I said, I now really understand the concept of microaggressions, because what happened to me over the course of this multiple days is it built up. It built up. And I absolutely lost my temper. That is not helpful when we're having a conversation around, I guess it's helpful in the sense of don't do what I did.
But it's go keep on.
It raises a question like, how do you, microaggressions are tricky things. How do you push back against them or deal with them without getting to that point where you blow your stack? And I don't have an answer for that.
Right. Well, it's like thinking like, when do you recognize them and when does your mind allow you to act on them?
Yep.
And I think that goes back to what I was saying, the professional and assertive and being approachable, just having the EQ to have the conversation, because we know, if our EQ is there, someone else's probably isn't. So we just have to have the conversation and make it known, like, this is what you did. This is how it made me feel. Let's clear the air. Let's keep the professional relationship going. And I think that's whether you're dealing with a male colleague or a female colleague. I mean, there's going to be some issues that occur, and communication is key. So you have to have the open communication in order to keep that relationship positive.
Oh.
But I raised that question, actually. So if you're in a situation where it's a male colleague or a male client who is behaving in those, there's the behavior that's really obvious that you can really call out and deal with, right? Like the guy grabs your ass and okay, right?
Yep.
But the little things, it's very hard to address them. And I do think that underlies some of the issues that not all professional men and women relationships have, but some of them, there's those subtle those subtle, it's too complicated, Angel, for you to understand it,
Yeah.
Right.
Those
Subtle innuendos. And Joyce, you went straight from microaggressions to sexual harassment.
But that's what I'm saying, right? Like the out and out sexual harassment, like we get that, right? Like we all get, and at that point you're like, okay, I think I know enough now to know how to deal with that.
Right.
So I suppose that's an improvement, right? Of perhaps where we all were early in our career. I don't know, Kelly, I know you walked some of the same hallways I walked. So,
Joyce and I both started our career as lawyers, Angel. So there's
Oh.
so we're bringing some of that baggage with us to this conversation.
For sure. But I think baked into the original question is a little bit of how you navigate the little things, the little discomforts, whether they're microaggressions or just discomforts.
Right. Yeah.
I think this is a good point to bring up another topic, because when we're thinking about relationships between men and women, some of the things that I'm sure both of you probably heard before is people say, oh, well, women are too sensitive, or we're too emotional, and we take things too personally. And I think up into a certain extent, like maybe it is proven that women are a bit more in tune with their emotions than the men. But I think when it comes to anything that's related to any type of harassment, especially sexual harassment, it's like that draws the line. It's like, wait a minute. But not saying that you can't draw the line at other comments or microaggressions, but it's difficult to maintain professionalism when you're being placed in those situations. And so, I think, oh gosh, we can go down a rabbit hole with this.
No, totally. But I think you're both hitting on that thing of in some ways it comes back to Joyce's answer originally, like, Jesus, we like some of this stuff we're still having this conversation, or when someone says you're being emotional, it's like, yeah, because I'm 30 plus years into a career and I still have to deal with this shit.
Right.
So excuse me if if I seem a little emotional. I'm a bit exhausted about it at this point.
Yeah.
But one of the things, when I got hit with this question and saw it in my inbox, one of the things I always say to people, and particularly thinking about our early career, Joyce, in law, is I always say, look at how people are successful in an industry before you step into it. See what they like. How do people build relationships? And then ask yourself, A, is that something that you're happy to navigate or come up against? Or is there a way you can find a different way to build the relationships? If building these key relationships, as you and I both know, Joyce, from being lawyers, is critical to career success. So my golf story, I'll finish this. My golf story, Angel, was when I was practicing law in Toronto, I had a mentor who asked if I played golf. And I said, I suspect I'm going to now learn. And he says, yes, that's the right answer. And then he went to explain why it was critical for my career success. That every single decision in the bankruptcy bar in Toronto was made on the golf course. And he said, if you're not in that room, he says, I can't advocate strongly for you. I can advocate for you, but I can't advocate as strongly. And this is the way, he said, I don't care if you're a good golfer or a shitty golfer. I don't care if at 18 holes, if you play 2, but I need you in that room. And once I had that understanding, it was like, okay, I can suck it up and do this. But without that understanding, it was like, okay. And then I understood this is where the relationships, this is like follow the money. This is why, having to do those things. Anyway, Joyce, you were going to say.
Yeah, Kelly, interestingly, and I'm sorry, I almost jumped in and interrupted you, because I too have a golf story, which is not mine. But there was an associate at the firm that I worked in, which was a very prestigious, small, but very prestigious New York City law firm. And there was an associate who began her career at the same time I did and decided that she was going to take up golf in a serious kind of way. And she took lessons and she golfed every weekend and she held herself out as a golfer. And we never had the conversation. So I never asked her, is this something that you're doing because you suddenly discovered a passion for golf? But she was, I believe, the second or third female partner ever made at that firm. Coincidence? I don't know. So it goes to, if you're looking to build that common ground and you don't hate golf, maybe there is something to it.
Right.
Metaphorically, I don't literally mean golf, right? But maybe
Right.
there is something to doing some of the things that your male colleagues and clients enjoy.
Right. Like, but where are the real decisions made? Like, where is the real relationship made versus, gee, everyone else does this, I should go and do this too. Or you make a gross generalization that this is the place or the only way, right? The partner that I worked with, he made it very clear, and it was like he was right. After he'd been, practicing law for 30 years in that area, this is where decisions made. So it was like, okay, am I going to make it real? It's going to be tougher for me to advance in the profession than learning how to play golf. But that was the way to build the relationships with the senior male clients and the, trustees and bankruptcy and all that kind of good stuff. But that was like a real reason to, go and take up the boys' activity, so to speak, versus, an imaginary one. I'll put it that way. Angel, your thoughts on all of this?
Oh gosh, and of course, this goes back to when we opened for this conversation, and what the advice was from a senior leader for me to learn to play golf, which I never did. I've always been one to be a bit disruptive, ruffle a few feathers along the way, and think outside the box. Where I just said, no, I'm not going to go the traditional route to grow my career and do these things that I don't want to do. And I've definitely found it advantageous to be unique and find some other common ground through shared experiences. So why do you need to do, just because the larger part of the group is playing golf or smoking cigars, you don't have to do that. Maybe you can find some other common ground that's very unique between you and that one particular person to build that relationship with. And you can stand out from the crowd. And so that's my advice. And I've done it. It works for me. But I'm so against that. And it might be fruitful in some environments. But I think in the end, we would only have those regrets of saying, I've spent all of this time learning to do something that I don't even enjoy, just to please a few people at work.
You used an expression again that I think is actually critical to the correct answer to this question, truly, which is shared experiences. And I think the short answer, not to oversimplify it, but the short answer to how do you build these relationships? Well, it's being appropriate and assertive and showing up and professional and doing your job, obviously, all those things. But it's also, relationships are founded in shared experiences, whatever they are.
Right.
And without any judgment as far as what shared experiences you're able to find.
Right.
Your male colleagues, your male clients, whether it's food, whether it's a love of restaurants, whether it's a love of mochi, whatever the heck it is, it's finding shared experiences. I think that's the key always.
Or maybe it's a shared passion around the subject matter that you're an expert in, and
right.
why we need to know what their hobbies are and how they like to spend their weekends and doing that with them, why we even need to go there. That's the other piece on all this I always sort of think of when, kind of questions around struggling to build a relationship, whether it's a woman with a senior, male client or something else, or, I had a question once from a woman who's like, oh, I don't know what to talk to my boss about. The guys get to have this personal experience, like personal relationship. And I'm like, so talk about the work, like, right? And things in and around the work, and related topics to the work, like there's all sorts of richness in there. You don't have to get into someone's personal life.
Right. And Kelly, I agree with you. And this is definitely probably an unpopular opinion, but some of the things that I've found and I've seen, of course, so this is not absolute, but some people will use those extracurricular activities to really take place for the experience that they don't necessarily have, or that expertise, because they can't have a conversation around the expertise. So they're like, oh, relate on whatever this this person likes to do on the weekend and build this relationship and be buddy because, they're not necessarily an expert per se. And sometimes those are the people who end up getting promoted, or especially if you're in a smaller company. But that unpopular opinion.
But there's still the cross-country flight. All of this, to your point, Kelly, is bringing back memories of being a young lawyer, right? But the thought of sitting next to my mentor, who was male and all the things, and I guess 25 years my senior, sitting next to him on a plane from New York to California for 6 hours, there's only so much work you can talk about.
Right.
So I don't know, in my professional experience, I have found it kind of tricky to navigate these waters on an individual basis, right? Like I'm thinking about Michael, and I'm thinking about this guy, and I'm thinking about when I lost my temper last year, which I suppose goes full circle to the start of the conversation, which is people are individuals, and some people are awesome and some people not so much.
Yep. Well, I think there's sometimes where we're just so, self-conscious, like, you think of that instance of, cross-country flight, and you want to pull out your Harlequin romance, and then you're thinking, oh God, what are they going to think of me if I'm, I'm reading Jilly Cooper on my flight down, I better bring something intellectual rather than, being yourself.
I'm laughing because when I was traveling for work, I always carry some book, like something that was like seemingly intelligent with me, so no one would question what I was actually reading.
I had a, and then I'll get your final tips. I had a fun time hanging on a beach. I think I was in Aruba, and it was a surefire way to make sure no one sat near me because I was reading the feminist book Everyone Loves Dick, and literally everyone stayed away from me. So I just gotta share that one. If you want space on a beach from everyone staying away from you, just, even if you're not reading the book, just put it on your towel. People will avoid you. Anyway, noticing the time at the water cooler, this was our question this time about building relationships with, I want to say, someone who is, in this case, it was the opposite gender, and more senior. So I'm feeling there's a power imbalance. But any kind of final words of wisdom, Angel and Joyce? I want to say, Angel, you want to, or Joyce, whoever doesn't want to have the last word, the other can jump in first.
I missed that because my connection went out, but I assume you're asking for last words.
The last words, yes. We saw you. So, go ahead.
So last words, I would definitely say, remember to build that common ground, find some shared experiences, be trustworthy, have the open communication and transparency, and be professional and approachable, because it's not always women that aren't approachable. Sometimes men are unapproachable, but we get the flack, like, oh, she's has, RBF. I think we all know what that means, but just be approachable and be professional, and keep the communications going. And if something happens and you're uncomfortable, make it known. And that's a part of relationship building.
Yeah. And I think, that picks up on like leverage our strength. We're used to being the fly in the room, not, like having to watch out for everyone else to swat at us. So use those powers of observation to figure out those areas of common ground. Joyce?
Assume positive intent. Start relationships assuming that the person is an individual, assuming that they want the relationship, they want the business, they want the whatever it is that has brought you together in this professional situation. Assume that they are there for the appropriate reasons until they prove you otherwise, and treat everybody as an individual. And I suppose my last thought around this is everybody's favorite topic is themselves. So one of the easiest ways to build a relationship, keeping it professional, but nevertheless, there's a whole lot you can discuss with somebody professionally, or finding that common interest simply by asking questions and getting to know them.
Yep. I always like to say the most powerful networking tool is listening. We worry so much about what to say, and we should worry about how do we listen. But yes, that's a brilliant point to leave it on. Both of you, thank you so much for coming to the water cooler today. For anyone watching, if you've got a networking or career question, hey, we like to come and share our thoughts on these things. So please do, reach out, let us know how you thought about today's conversation, as well as if you've got questions. We'd love to riff on them at the water cooler. Ladies, thank you both, and I look forward to seeing you back here again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Angel, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.